Joining us tonight in our center seat feature, Republican presidential candidate and Texas Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We have started this looking at the position of our center seat guest. We have a new Fox News poll out today, and you take a look at this. You are at 9% in this new national poll, and you see Kaine, Romney, Gingrich, and Perry there. A new CNN Time poll in New Hampshire has you in third at 12%, and the same organizations in Iowa have you at third in 12%. What do you see as your path to the Republican nomination? What do you have to do in these early states?
Well, you know, a lot of individuals come and go in these polls, up and down, and my support has been pretty steady and continues to grow. So I have to continue to do what I'm doing, more so, and we're very pleased with it. We raise the money that we need. I need to be out there campaigning. We do our television, but we have to do well. We have directed most of our attention to New Hampshire and Iowa and Nevada, you know, the early states. But I would say that come January, it'll be make or break for us, there's no doubt.
You've just raised about $2.5 million on this money bomb, and you've done this a few times, but this one specifically points to what organizations that are tied to your campaign, Black This Out, say is unfair media coverage. And the quote is, "You are trying to control the outcome of this election directed towards the media and will never cover in fair, reasonable, and journalistic manner the only candidate that can beat Obama, so we have resolved to counter your efforts." And you raised a lot of money. Do you believe you're getting unfair treatment in the media?
I don't know. I think at times it's distorted, but I don't know if I want to use the word unfair because I know how the media works. I mean, there's one thing when I essentially tied, you know, in Iowa for the Ames straw vote. I mean, it was barely mentioned. Sometimes it would be mentioned, oh, they know who's in first and third and fourth. So the supporters don't let anything go by on that. And they
Tell
usually,
me about it.
But I try to think about my policies and keeping up with the news.
Just for the record, you have appeared on Fox since your announcement that you were running a total of 43 times and 70 times since January of 2011.
I'm so tired. That makes me tired.
So we are giving you a lot of time on this channel. Steve.
Congressman, I've spent some time over the past couple days with your plan to restore America, and there is, I think, a lot in there that Republican primary voters will like, eliminating government departments like education, HUD, and others. One thing that I think might raise eyebrows is the cuts in defense spending, some $200 billion below President Obama's fiscal year 2012 levels. Former Defense Secretary Bob Gates said that such cuts would be catastrophic in terms of our capabilities. And I wonder why people should trust your judgment over that of Bob Gates.
Well, I think what is catastrophic is what's happening to our debt and the world financial system, and part of it is our military spending. See, I don't cut defense. I cut military spending, which doesn't, from my viewpoint, you know, help our defense. We're all around the world spending a lot of money. But, you know, even if we go down to the 500 or so billion that I talk about, we'd still be 5 times more than what China would have. And if you look at all our spending plus all our allies, it's literally 70% of all the world military spending. We have so many weapons. Who's going to attack us? Nobody's on the verge of invading us or attacking us. So I think the crisis in finances has driven me for 40 years, because I got involved in this because I saw what was coming once you know, we accepted this new monetary system, and everything is a part of it, all the spending. But you know, this sovereign debt crisis is about to explode in our face. Today, I thought it was pretty interesting to know that the oldest bank in the history of the world since the 13th century is on the verge of going broke. So that tells you how significant this is. So I don't feel like I'm taking anything away from defense. I think we're stronger.
When somebody like Bob Gates and other uniformed military leaders say that you're Panetta and others, Joint Chiefs Chairman nominee, say that this is weakening America's capabilities. I mean, there's no question that it would leave America a weaker nation. You don't think so?
No, I just disagree with him. But he also said that anybody who thinks about another war, another invasion needs their head examined too. So I'm trying to head that off. No, I wouldn't do it if I thought I was weaker. I believe strongly in the Constitution. There's only one group that can have a strong national defense. That's the federal government. But I think the participation in bankrupting this country will be defeated more by what's happening here with our finances. Another downgrade coming? I mean, how long can we continue to do this? And, you know, in theory, we're borrowing this money from overseas in order to keep this military operation going. But I don't think for 1 minute we're going to be less safe. Matter of fact, a lot of people could make an argument that we could be more safe if we concentrated on defending this country, worrying about our borders, and instead of worrying about figuring out where the borders are between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Speaking of banks, Juan?
You know, Congressman Paul, I wrote earlier this year, this is the age of Ron Paul, because, you know, you look back at the 08 campaign and a lot of the things that you stood for, the debt that you're now talking about, smaller government, that became the heart and soul of the Tea Party and the Tea Party movement. Now, as you watch the Occupy Wall Street movement, do you see them as reflecting some of your anger and frustration with the Fed and with the federal government? Wall Street?
Yeah, I do. I don't think that, you know, I can say, well, everything that's happening on Occupy Wall Street is something, you know, that I fully endorse. But I think it's this frustration. I think it's the frustration with the American people, not just tired with Obama, but tired of the Republicans. They're looking for something else. So this is why the election occurred last year with the Tea Party movement, but that hasn't satisfied everybody. This is why I didn't like the idea when I think Keynes said that these people ought to just go out and get a job. Well, I blame the victims. But there are some there that would advocate positions that I bet we might agree we shouldn't be advocating. I advocate the market, but I complain that this 1% are very wealthy because they get benefits through the inflationary system, through the contract system, through the military expenditure system, through the bailout system. So I identify with them, and a lot of them are anti-Federal Reserve people that are there. But some of them just say, well, the solution is just raise taxes on the rich, and they put everybody in the same category. Everybody who's made money is a bad person, and I don't believe that.
Congressman, on the issue of immigration, this is what you said in one of the debates. Take a listen here.
I think this fence business is designed and may well be used against us and keep us in. In economic turmoil, the people want to leave with their capital, and there's capital controls and there's people control. So every time you think of a fence keeping all those bad people out, think about those fences maybe being used against us, keeping us in.
Charles.
Keeping us in. Any piece of territory, large or small, that is fenced in and for the purpose of keeping people in is by textbook definition a prison. Is the United States a prison?
Well, I think, you know, there was a Iron Curtain once. I think of what we're developing here as a financial Iron Curtain in a way where you can't travel back and forth. I've lived on both borders. I did my medical training, some in Michigan and I lived in Texas. And it was always nice that I could go back and forth with no passport. So it's very difficult. So not only do we use the excuse of watching for the bad guys coming into our country to control us. Currency and capital controls are very common when you get into difficulties. I'm thinking about the financial controls where you don't have freedom to leave, and they already do exist. People who expatriate,
so that wasn't literal. Your fence reference.
Well, I was thinking of it probably more in finances, but you know, if it deteriorates, if our system deteriorates, which is quite capable, when this thing breaks down, there will be more people control. These ID cards, you know, the ID cards, the real ID card they had. Well, one reason why the states didn't like it, well, it costs money, but that means you and I have to carry it, or we're discriminating. So we say we want to protect the borders and that, so we end up with the ID card. What, just this last week, there's checking people in Tennessee, you know, just like the TSA, on our automobiles.
Congressman, in this century, capital travels through computers, not in a suitcase across the border. Are you worried that Americans are going to be stopped at the border with a fence and not allowed to leave?
Financially, I think they will. Even with computers, they can put a lot of controls on you. But
with a fence, that doesn't.
No, I'm not even for a fence.
That's not going to stop a wire transfer.
Well, they can put financial controls. They've had wire transfers for years, but they have tax. You know, the IRS knows what's going on. You have to report everything. So what I want to do is bring all that money back, not inhibit it from going on. People have a freedom to leave. They should be able freedom to take their assets. It's a well-known fact. Now, if you say the conditions are such, hopefully you're right. It'd be nice if we can circumvent their desire, but it's inevitable. When you have financial crisis, they put on currency controls and capital controls. I mean, it's been.
My point is that offense never stopped a capital money
No,
money
it
wire
never
transfer.
stops illegal immigrants either.
We're back with our center seat segment and Congressman Ron Paul. Now turning to foreign policy. Charles, start with you.
You've said that it would be natural for Iran to want to acquire a nuclear weapon, and it would be of no concern to the United States. Well, what if Iran then proceeded to use the weapon to annihilate Israel and kill 6 million Jews? Would that be of concern to the United States?
I think you've misstated my position. It's a big concern. I don't like nuclear weapons. The less, the better. I have said that right now we don't have concrete evidence that by our CIA or the United Nations that they're, on the verge of it. And I don't think that we have enough reason to go to war against Iran. I was in the military in the 60s, and the Soviets had 40,000 of these, so I know a little bit about, confronting an enemy. But Israel, has a few of those weapons themselves, like about 300. I think Israel sacrifices way too much sovereignty to us. You have to ask us to deal with their borders and what they can do, both defending their borders or dealing with their friends. And right now, Israel is more vulnerable ever because of the breakdown of all our puppets over there. But Ahmadinejad, the Iranians, they're not going to attack somebody with a weapon they don't have. They're not even capable of producing enough gasoline for themselves.
Would you keep sanctions on?
No. Why put sanctions on them? We took sanctions off the Soviets, and they murdered hundreds of millions of people.
Congressman, in the debate,
and in China the same way. We dealt with the Chinese are pretty vicious. So far, the Iranians have not invaded any other countries, and I know they're very difficult, but they haven't invaded their neighbors, and they haven't been threatening to invade us.
In the debate, you said, why wouldn't it have been natural for the Iranians to want a weapon? They'd be given more respect. Why should we write these people off? We should stay out of their internal business. So essentially, you're okay with Iran getting a nuclear weapon.
I don't think it's our business to decide. But a good example of this is Libya. Libya is sort of our friend, and then they became our enemy, and then we forgave the killer of Lockerbie, and then we said, would you give up your weapons? And he gave up his weapons, then he got clobbered. So with NATO, with us. So it's a good lesson. Hang on to your nuclear weapons. Maybe they'll respect it.
Is there any situation, Congressman, where you would deploy U.S. troops abroad?
If our national security was threatened, and
but if Iran has a nuclear weapon and it's potentially threatening us,
did we attack Russia or China? They had a lot of nuclear weapons. We didn't attack them. That was 1,000 times more dangerous.
So deterrence with Iran would be your policy.
We had lots of sanctions on Russia and China.
Yeah, but we eventually gave up, and Reagan talked to them. We talked to them, and we talked. We took off the sanctions. We traded with
after 50
China.
Years.
Well, I think it's the policy is wrong. It does more harm to us. I think it makes Israel much less safe. We have undermined that. Just look, Turkey's not exactly their best friend now. Egypt now, they're going to radical Islam now. Tunisia, it's going to be Islamic as well. So they're less friendly with Israel now. So I think this is all going to back. Besides, we're going to go broke. We're not going to be able to maintain this forever, and that's why I think we should have a different foreign policy and treat them at least equal to the way we treated those horrible Chinese. We've been working. See, I was in high school when we went to war against Korea, and here we are all these years later. I liked it much better when Nixon went and opened up the doors with China.
We're not talking about war. You want to lift sanctions. That's not war.
Well, it is a war. The first thing you do when you go to war, you put boycotts on them and you blockade a country. It is, in many ways, an act of war.
Steve.
After the killing of Osama bin Laden, you said of the raid, there could have been a better way to do this. Would President Paul have authorized that raid into Pakistan?
No, since I suggested a better way, I would go back.
You would not have authorized that?
Well,
so Osama bin Laden would be alive today?
I said, no, let me answer. I said there was a better way, and the better way was what I originally said after 9/11. I voted for the authority, I voted for the funds, go after them. A couple hundred of our special forces had them trapped and walked away at Tora Bora.
Okay,
and
well,
wasted
that
10
didn't
years.
happen. I'm talking about
Yes,
2011.
Okay. What I'm saying, he's a bad guy. We should have done it. And the better way was doing it 10 years ago instead of going in and wasting all these American
So
lives.
you would not, because that didn't happen,
No,
in
but
2011 you would not have aukhorized that raid into Pakistan.
Well, I think since KSM was delivered to us by Pakistanis, that we should at least talk to them, sure. I mean, what is so terrible about that? Why? But
Despite
right
the
now,
fact that he was
but
living
look at what,
in
look
the
at what
garrison
results
city.
are. I says this was a risky way because now we're lobbing missiles over there. Our drones are bombing. At the same time, we're giving money to the government. There's a civil war going on, and we've created this because we support a government that's very unpopular, and that's what it leads to. Now we have Karzai saying, you know what? When the war breaks out, we're supporting Pakistan against America.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a hard break to hit. We have much more to talk about. We'll continue this discussion. Juan has a great question. Special Report Online continues right after the show. Welcome to another edition of Special Report Online. I'm Brett Baer. This is our Center Seat segment, a special segment with Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul. Thanks for sticking around. A lot of people typing in. By the way, we have a poll up. In our Fox News poll today, you were in fourth, but in this poll online, you get 49% of those typing in. A lot of questions. Many people asking a variety of things. Here's one. Asking about your immigration policy. You got into the fence situation, but they want to know specifically how would you handle immigration?
Well, of course, that's a fairly complicated subject. I've written a pretty long paragraph in my last book on immigration. But basically, I think we should have more border patrols and better immigration work.
So you would put troops on the border?
No, I don't want troops, but I want facilities. I want the border guards, not the border guards, but the immigration people. I think we're very inept. But I think it's an economic problem. You know, if we were a thriving economy, we'd be short of labor and we'd want labor to come in. So economics is a bad thing. The welfare system has something to do with it, because it is true. I know people argue with us on this, but it is true that some of our people don't work because they lose too much money if they go to work and they get off welfare. So I think there's some of that. So the welfare system discouraged some of our workers, but it also, the mandates from the federal government are very detrimental. In Texas, we have hospitals going broke and schools going broke, so they come over and they get these free services. I would think that there should be no amnesty, no easy way, even if you have to deal, and I think there's no way you're going to send 15 million people home. But you should deal with something with a different category, but they shouldn't get the right to vote very easily. There should be no rewards for breaking the law. But I would like to see a more efficient immigration at the border.
Juan.
So far, in that seat, the center seat, we've had Michelle Bachmann, Santorum, even Gary Johnson and John Huntsman just yesterday. Now, when we asked about whether or not they would support you, if you are the Republican nominee, we got a lot of hesitation, reservations. Is it the case that you will support whomever the Republican nominee is?
Well, I would check out their platform by that time. I would think that they would have to have a certain position on the Federal Reserve, certain position on cutting spending, certain position on civil liberties, and if they shift a little bit, I quite well may be able to.
Well, it sounds like you're saying no. So let me then follow up with this question.
I would have to make a later decision.
Yeah, you're not saying yes. Okay, so what happens then? Everybody in this town thinks there's going to be a third-party candidate, an independent candidate. If you don't get the Republican nomination, could that independent candidate be Ron Paul?
No, look, Juan, you have to realize, let's say I was thinking about that, and I said that. then it would undermine what I'm doing. I'm running for presidency. I'm doing pretty well. I'm in third. So no, I'm running for president in the Republican Party. I'm doing very well. And last time they wondered about it. But, you know, the whole thing is, boy, the people are really frustrated. You go to New Hampshire, there are more independents than Republicans or Democrats.
Well, that's true.
Well, how about this? How about this?
Yeah, so there it is.
But what you're saying is you are not saying that you will not run as an independent.
Well, what I say is that I have no plans to do it.
All right.
So how about, are you big on pledges? Would you pledge here tonight that you would not run in a third party?
I pledge that I have no intention of doing it.
All right.
I'm running for this Republican primary.
That sounds pretty political, Congressman.
Well,
Okay.
you know, I have to vacillate a little bit in my life.
Okay.
We need a grammarian who will work on that sentence.
I wanted to revisit our discussion about Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. After the raid, you said this: we have created a lot of enemies because that's what the Taliban is all about. They're organized and they're motivated by the fact that we're occupying their land. Which land? Which Taliban land were we occupying on 9/11?
On 9/11, we had a major air base in Saudi Arabia, and they wrote and talked about it, and they complained about it.
But the Taliban, not in Afghanistan.
No, just America's in the Middle East on their holy land, which aggravated the Al-Qaeda at that time. Now, the Taliban's a little bit different because their goal is not to come over here. Al-Qaeda will come over here. So that's quite a bit different. But Talibans are, you know, people who want to just get us out of their country. That's why it's Afghanistan and all. But, you know, we went into Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda there, and they're there now. Everybody recognizes that there's not a huge number, but there are probably hundreds of Al-Qaeda. They weren't there before. The Christians have been run off from Iraq, and now Iraq is much closer to Iran than ever before. So I don't think there's much victory there.
Well, there were Al-Qaeda in Iraq beforehand, but I won't. I'll let Charles
There's a
next.
whole book on
We
that.
could do about a 3-hour debate on that, but I'll let Charles go next.
All right, Congressman, 1 + 1 equals 2. That's this person's login. What area of policy are you weakest in?
What area? Well, I only have one subject that I'm interested in, and I don't consider myself weak, and that is the defense of liberty, because I think that's what America's all about, and I know what it is. I know what it means to be free and what civil liberties mean and what it means to the free market, and also it advises about our foreign policy. At the same time, the founders understood this very clearly, and they wrote a document which, fortunately for me, endorses the idea of individual liberty. So it's individual liberty I feel very strong in. I would say my weakest trait would be that I could always improve on my delivery, you know, and convince people. But young people with more open minds and open hearts, they seem to understand what I'm saying.
You did well in the delivery of that non-pledge.
Mike in Bogota writes, what is your stance on global warming? Man-caused?
Partially, but I think the radical environmentalists have taken it over. Just recently, some major publications and universities have made some reports on this that, to me, are very, very strong. And these are scientists that says that it's been way overblown. So I read about that in the book, but think that the environmentalists take advantage of it. But to say that man doesn't contribute, but the statistics that show long term, hundreds if not thousands of years, we're not about, you know, to melt. Besides, the one thing that really made me wonder about this, when they took some of these same scientists now that talked about a warming trend, they were worrying about an ice age 30 or 40 years ago. That made me wonder, you know, what's going on here. But the reason that we don't do well for libertarians and conservatives is they think that if we don't endorse the EPA, we don't care about the environment. So I think it makes a point that we ought to be much better in defending the environment as property rights people, rather than saying that we have to depend on a bureaucrat from Washington making sure the environment is protected.
Charles.
You're a defender of liberty. Is there any drug you would not legalize under your administration if you were in power? Could I walk into any store and buy marijuana, heroin, meth, or crack cocaine? Is there any that you would?
Well,
not allow me to buy on the free market.
Yeah, the way I understand the Constitution, the federal government shouldn't be in this business of legalizing anything, so the federal government shouldn't make anything illegal. But the states have this authority to do it. I mean, the federal government tried to make alcohol illegal, and prohibition doesn't work very well.
Meth and alcohol aren't exactly equivalent.
Well, yeah, I know, but if you compare it to marijuana, alcohol kills a lot more people than marijuana.
I agree, but
my position is, to answer your question, my position is the federal government should butt out because they've only been involved in about 100 years and they've sort of messed up. Yeah. We've spent over $1 trillion on the war on drugs, hasn't done a bit of good. The states still have prerogatives on alcohol. They have it, and they can protect children and do all these things. So yes, there's a way. It's not like when you legalize something, you endorse something. It's just dealing with it in a different manner. So the states would still have a prerogative on dealing with it.
If you're a believer in liberty as a principle, and you are, say, the governor of Texas, why would you, as governor of Texas, any more want to make it illegal to purchase crack than you would if you were the president? I understand the principle of federalism, but as a matter of principle, why would you, as governor, not want to cancel all the laws in Texas that outlaw the purchase of these drugs?
Why would you want to cancel out what the founders gave us in our documents? And it was always legal up until last century at 19.
So you would legalize if you were the governor?
I would let the states do it, and that would be the way that it's supposed to be done. And it was that way. I don't know why we've given up on liberty so soon, because are you going to use it if somebody legalizes something? This whole idea that it's legal, you're all going to be drug addicts.
Depends what you're offering me.
Congressman,
nobody uses it because it's legal. They use it because it's illegal.
On the same line, you have an ad out about pro-life. And what is your position on the federal government's role in abortion? And what should be legal and what shouldn't be legal? If you make that argument on the drugs, are you making the argument then that the federal government should be out of pro-life,
right,
pro-choice?
Sure. That would be the logical conclusion. But there's a little bit, I mean, when the government's so much involved in medicine, you better make sure they don't use our money to do abortions. The military, you can have some controls there. But the federal government cannot, I mean, this is the whole reason why Roe versus Wade made such a mess of it. It was a Texas law, they prohibited it. There was Roe versus Wade, they nationalized it. Now, many right-to-life people are saying, what we need is a Supreme Court ruling and amend the Constitution, but they don't accept my bill, which removes the jurisdiction. I would remove the jurisdiction, that's We the People's Act, on these various things, and just say that if the states do something, try to, get the federal government out of it. We don't want the Supreme Court legislating as they did in Roe versus Wade. So I would apply the same rule to that.
So the states would make the decision, and not the federal government.
The state would do it.
Congressman, let's go to Republican politics. This week, Rick Perry said it's good politics to keep the birther issue alive. Now, he's gone back and forth on this, but do you think it's good politics to kind of prod and poke at President Obama over where he was born?
No, I don't think it's good politics. I think it's probably bad politics. But, one thing about that, why didn't anybody ever ask whether his mother was a citizen? If she was a citizen, wouldn't have to be an automatic and would make the whole thing moot. No, I don't think it's good politics at all. I never bring the subject up.
Steve?
When I was watching the video of your rollout of the plan to restore America, one of the things that surprised me was you don't call for the abolition of the Fed, at least not right away.
Right.
So who would your Fed chairman be?
Jim Grant, probably.
And what are his main arguments?
He's an Austrian economist. He has experience on Wall Street. He's brilliant. He's a good historian. He'd quit printing money. No, I don't call for the abolishment, but almost all the things that I have done and proposed, like in medicine, I want medical savings accounts, I want a transition, I want freedom of choice schools, just make sure we never make it illegal, that we can't have homeschooling and private schooling, and just legalize competition. In money, the bill that I have is to legalize choice, take off taxes, sales taxes and capital gain tax on money, which is gold and silver, because that is, the Constitution still says gold and silver is legal tender. So, but to close down the Fed tomorrow, even back when I was on the Gold Commission in the early 80s, it was my same position. This is Hayek's position, competing currencies. And this way you don't have to be disruptive and say, we're going to close down the Fed.
the financial system is going to close itself down. That's what I fear. That's why I think it's so desperate that we get control of this budget, because every single day we're getting closer to something bigger than we've ever had before.
What would you do to help the Europeans out, especially if you look at what's going on in Greece, that could have terrible repercussions on our economy? It's a global structure. We can't kind of wall ourselves off. So what would Ron Paul do if he was over at the Fed to help Greece out, or would you ignore it?
I'd keep my hands off, because the only thing you can do is print more money. See, it looks like our economy was saved by the bailouts and the Fed creating $15 trillion and sending $5 trillion overseas. Sure, it temporized it, but it's also ushering in the age of inflation, and it's perpetuated.
There's no inflation.
Oh, it's 9% right now. If you use the old CPI, it's 9%. And even our own government admits it is over 3 today.
It's tiny. Come on.
Talk to this consumer. Do you go shopping?
Congressman, if you're okay for a couple more questions, I know we're at 7:15. If you're okay,
I do.
Mans of South Carolina wants to know who your VP pick would be.
I'm going to win the nomination first before I pick him.
Matt Simon would like to know how President Paul would immediately stimulate the economy.
Immediately. Well, since I want the troops home, and I can do that as president, you bring the troops home from Korea and all these places, have them spend all that money here. And that would be a little boost until we iron out our foreign policy, but bring the troops home and let them spend their money, and send a signal that all the regulations written and all the executive orders that compounded our problems in the financial sector, the president can do a lot to change that. We're over-regulated and over-taxed. You need Congress to get the taxes back in order, but you need to send a signal. We're going to live within our means. We're going to have sound money. We're going to shrink the size of the Federal Register, and we'll go back to sanity and have our Constitution back someday.
Jeff says, what about the fair tax? Where do you stand?
I probably would vote for, I'm not a co-sponsor. The fair tax is the sales tax, and I don't think it's completely fair. It's not fair to retired people, and it's not fair to, it's a regressive tax. I think the poor, get stuck with that.
What would your tax plan be?
0, 0, 0. I mean, I would like to get rid of the income tax and the corporate tax and shrink the size of government. And we only have had an income tax since 1913.
So wait.
Anything
0, 0, 0. You mean to tell me? Yeah, I know. But what is the real President Paul going to do on taxes?
I'd do anything I can to lower them. Anything and everything. Tax is a burden. But the reason I don't emphasize that as much, and I'm not on any bills, is spending is the tax. Spending takes the money out of the community, then they tax us, then they borrow it, and then they print it. And it all goes back and destroys the economy, pushes the prices up for the poor, and the poor suffer more than the rich. The characteristic of the destruction of a currency, we're about 98% devaluation since the Fed came in. When you destroy a currency, and this comes from Austrian economics, that there's a transfer of wealth from the middle class to the wealthy. And this is why the Wall Streeters are right, but I'm not sure the occupiers understand this. But this is always the case. And then they get the control and the power, they get the bailouts. But what happens to the middle class? They lose their jobs and they lose their houses. So
but if you do a massive cut at the beginning of a Paul presidency, right, doesn't that in itself affect the economy in a detrimental way immediately?
Not necessarily. Study what happened after World War II. 10 million people came back. They weren't given jobs. The military budget was slashed, I think, approximately 50 or 60%. Taxes went down. And all of a sudden, jobs became available again. But they didn't have to worry about 10 million people. Where were they going to go? And I'm not even advocating that. It's going to be through attrition. My program it gets rid of people through attrition, and it won't be overnight, just as the Federal Reserve is through attrition and through gradual changes.
Charles, last one.
Well, this is sort of out of left field, but if a major waterway, the Suez Canal or the Panama Canal, fell into hostile hands, what would you as Commander-in-Chief do, if anything?
I'd look at it and study it and find out if it was a threat to our national security, and go to the Congress, find out if they want to declare war, who the enemy is, and take care of it and get it over with.
Clive in Ireland, Dr. Paul has delivered 4,000 babies. Is that harder than politics?
It's Well, I better not say what I was going to say.
It's messier? Was that what you're going to say?
I mean, it's a lot more enjoyable than being grilled. You know, medicine is wonderful, and delivering babies was wonderful. And as my wife always said, you know, an OB doctor is one of the few doctors that gives you something. A lot of times, a doctor can only give you your health back. There was something very wonderful about it, and I loved it. Like I said, they didn't usually give me too much grief. Those babies were glad to get out.
Do you need to win Iowa? Where do you need to finish?
In the top. I would be disappointed with third, but I should be. I mean, if I come in third, I'm still alive, but I think I better do first or second in a couple of those. I have to do well in January.
Okay. Congressman Paul, thank you very much for the time. I think we set a record online. We'll check it out after this.
Oh, please let us know.
Thanks for watching Special Report Online. And remember, we have had you on quite a bit. So tell everybody that's a supporter that we're all right. Okay. Join us Fox News Channel every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern for Special Report. We'll see you next center seat next week. Herman Cain on Tuesday. Control Room. See you later.